What you can do is you can just click on this one. Everybody was long.
That was
All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Hopefully we have some more committee members show up eventually. But we do have a quorum. The purpose of this meeting today is a hearing on the proposed short-term rental ordinance. We're actually going to have two meetings today. After we've had this hearing, we're going to adjourn, and then the committee is going to reconvene and make a determination forward the ordinance onto the city council for their consideration. All right, that being said, we have two items on the agenda. Those opposed to the ordinance, and then we'll hear from those who are in favor of the ordinance. So I'd like to open the meeting with any council member comments. None. Then we'll open it up to the audience. Anyone who might be opposed to the ordinance, please, Dale, would you stand and identify yourself, please?
Dale Fenwick, 360 Bear Trail. That question. Are you opposed to the entire ordinance or opposed to?
Not necessarily, no. Just
if there's something in the ordinance that I don't like, this is what I talk.
Let us talk.
All right.
Let us go.
I don't like the fact that there's nothing in here about parking. I mean, I appreciate the fact that you streamlined the ordinance. I like most of that aspect of it. But I don't see anything about parking. I think the idea of having sufficient parking on the short-term rental property and keeping vehicles off of the, not just off the street, but off the shoulders of the streets.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's one thing to have service vehicles, construction vehicles that are parked on the shoulders and sometimes partially on the road but not blocking the road during the day. That's fine, but overnight, it completely changes the character of the community. So, I don't like that.
We're not.
On the enforcement section.
Mr. Fenwick, can you speak up? We're getting comments on Zoom saying the audio is poor, so I apologize, but just.
I'll use my.
Here's the microphone over here.
Secondly, on the enforcement section, the idea of 7 days for compliance makes sense for some things, but it doesn't make sense for all things. And I think there needs to be something done there to provide more rapid compliance with a problem. And then thirdly, section, sorry, I should have written it down. It's the very last section. Monitoring, section 41-14. I don't think it's appropriate for that section to be here at all. I think this locks you into a particular vendor. And if you decide to change vendors in a year or two, you're gonna have to come back and revise the ordinance. This reads more like a notice than it does a regulation. And I don't think it serves any purpose. Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's address some of these comments as they come up, and then that'll make it easier. I'll start with the last one first. We did have some language in here that we changed at a committee level because it did lock us in to a specific company. We changed the language to what you see here to avoid that.
You might have the old.
You might have the old one.
So if you want to read that.
All right, wait a minute.
The way it's written now, Mr. Chairman, the city Sky Valley may partner with a third-party internet-based short-term rental monitoring service company. Affiliate subsidiaries that are assigned to provide the city with address identification and rental activity monitoring of short-term properties in the city. So it's more generic now. So, and of course, the word is may, which is not mandatory but implied. So.
And that was done specifically for the reason you mentioned.
Thank you. I downloaded what was on the website.
Okay, that unfortunately, what was current,
Where is the current copy?
This is, well,
it was sent out with the meeting packet.
it was, I mean, that change should be on the website version.
It was.
If you just go to the home page
Okay, yeah.
on the website and go down, there's a link to the most current version. You don't have to dig through the website, it's right on the front page.
It was there and it is covered, as Jason explained.
Okay. Compliance, you're right. So there are certain things that compliance might have to go through a hearing process. Not everything. Violations of city codes that there's much of what can happen as far as noise ordinances and parking on the roads and what have you, that are ordinances within the city anyway, and the city police department has the right to enforce those things immediately.
So that's changed since the last meeting, right? The police can come in now and do.
They can't,
Okay,
correct?
so that's,
And
that was
this,
the whole big thing last time. The police could not come.
and we went through all this with our city attorney, and that's where we came up with this.
Yeah, okay.
The parking, what we did here was, you know, we're requiring short-term rentals to, again, to comply with all city ordinances and codes. Parking is one of those things, and you know, rather than start enumerating all the different codes and laws and what have you in the ordinance, we just refer back to the fact that you've got to comply with all of them as they are written. Several people have brought up the fact that we should probably put something in here about parking, and we will consider that later here today. Rudy.
Rudy Macy, 358 Big Bear Trail. I have two concerns, and I might have missed it. But one of the earlier meetings on this, we talked about the homeowner having an hour, if a complaint was called in, we talked about homeowner having an hour to fix it. And and I like that, and I'm gonna share why. The house across the street from us is constantly rented. The house next door is rented, but not constantly. What happens is people put their garbage out and they put it out when they leave, and then, or they put it out the night before, and in the morning, it ends up, the animals are in it, and it's all over our yard. It's all over the streets, and I have to pick it up. And now my back's bad, and it's really bad for me to have to bend over to pick it up. So I bought one of these things, but it's nasty. I shouldn't have to do that. Is that hour thing where they have to fix it still in place, or we have to wait 7 days for somebody to pick the garbage up out of our yard? That's one concern. And then the other concern is, 2 weeks ago, Dawn and I went to church on Saturday night. We stayed up late, we were gonna sleep in. Well, the house across the street had a yapper dog that they ran with. Most of the dogs aren't, but it was. It started around 6:30, and it went nonstop. It just barked and barked and barked. And we had our air conditioner on, the windows closed, and you just, you know, we never went back to bed. So is that something that we would call the police on to come out for that? That's my concern. So those are the two concerns. What's gonna happen, how long is it gonna take for enforcement to take place? And are they, if I ended up having to pick up all the garbage, then I think I should get paid for it. That's all. Thank you.
It's more talk about the internet.
Let me just, before we get on, we'll just address each thing as they come up. One of the reasons we're doing this, we're planning on doing this internet-based company to monitor all these things, is they're gonna keep logging complaints. And we have provisions in here that if there are repeated complaints against an individual property, they can lose that license. Now, that being said, things like parking all over the road, noise, yapper dogs, as you say, garbage. These are ordinances that exist anyway within the city of Sky Valley. Does it matter anymore to you that the yapper dog belongs to a tenant than it does, or a guest than it does an owner?
No, when they did, people living down below us, they were owners and they had the after dog, and twice the city put notices on their house, but nothing ever happened.
Well, then, in this case, there's going to be a little more enforcement, because if the city has to keep doing that, they will lose that license.
Rudy, the internet company that we are thinking about contracting with, one of the applications that it has on this particular website is they will give out a 24/7 number that residents or anybody can call to report yapper dogs or whatever, and they contact the owner immediately and say, take care of it. Then after an hour or whatever amount of time we set up, we call the owner and say, you haven't taken care of it, this is what's gonna happen next, and that's all the stuff we're gonna set up with this company.
Is that the same thing with the garbage?
It'll be
Sure.
everything.
Because I can guarantee you, I'm gonna have garbage all over my yard.
Right, it'll be all those things, parking, garbage, dogs, noise, yeah.
Oh, does that dog thing apply to resident
Well,
also?
that way. you-
Property owners,
You mean
sure,
the owners?
it's part of the noise ordinance.
For owners that are owner occupied?
Mhm.
You mean for short-term rentals or just plain owners?
Just
Just plain owners.
Well, then we have an ordinance. that
We have a
takes
guy
care of
that
that.
keeps a kennel at his house.
We have a nuisance ordinance that takes care of that,
Okay,
or should take care of that.
okay.
I just wondered if, have you?
Would you stand up and state your?
Is that on the-
Hold on.
That crappy guy, do they not have air-proof containers and enclosures and all that I have, that's not a problem.
They don't even put it in the container.
Our problem is we have
All
great.
right, let's,
Short-term.
hold on, folks, time out. You're going to speak, please speak to everyone, stand up and identify yourself first, please.
Shirley Bond,
Where do you live?
837 Rich Pole is my house, and I live in Loganville. The short-term rental. But I'm trying to shortcut stuff like that and be a nuisance to my neighbors by having bear-proof garbage cans, an enclosure around people that come and clean, take care of the garbage, and when they don't set it out on the street. So, we're trying to be proactive so that stuff doesn't happen. I can't believe everybody is like that.
I will go back to what I said probably at the beginning of this whole thing. 80–90% of the short-term rental owners here are very responsible. It's the few, unfortunately, over by Rudy and Vicky and, that spoil it for everyone else. And that's why we're all sitting here. Yes, we wish everyone would be that kind of, maintain that kind of responsibility, but they don't.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks. So I'm Andy Buick, I'm with NBC, we take care of a few short-term rentals over here locally. I would like to address the trash and the dog issue. We also are extremely responsible, and we make our clients sign an addendum that they will not leave trash outside, that they will have their dog on a leash. So at the end of the day, I guess one of my biggest questions are, is there not an enforcement of some sort that's making management or owners go that extra step so that we're not going into a situation like the internet-based monitoring? What is that gonna cost the owners each month?
It's not gonna cost the owners anymore.
No, okay,
It costs a value.
yeah.
It's
but
gonna
it's
cost us
gonna cost
$5.
somewhere.
But understand, there are gonna be licensing fees, that's enumerated here. There are taxes that are paid on short-term rentals. This internet-based company, that fee is gonna come out of all those fees that are collected by the city. So it's not gonna cost the city any more than what we have now. I mean, we're gonna pay for it through these fees. So, but yes, and again, the licensing is part of that. If they're not going to be responsible,
Right.
they're gonna get dinged several times and they're gonna lose that license and the ability to do that short-term rental.
Okay. Okay.
Who's up
And
there,
then-
Vicky?
Vicky Hare, 32 Saddleback. I think that this is, to me, is being put in because there are a lot of people that aren't like y'all,
Right.
that aren't doing it. I live, and they know, I've said this 100 times, I have parking across the street with them going the wrong way up the street. I have them parking in my neighbor's yard. The house sleeps 16, I've counted, because it's not even written 25 times, out of 25 times, 20 times, it had over 16 people.
Right.
25 people.
So this is what I'm
The
saying.
ones that live here, they own, and I've bragged on them 100 times. You go by their house, you never see too much parking, you never see trash, you never see that there, because they're right here to take care of that property. We have them going in my neighbor's yard, throwing trash, taking pictures on their porches. I mean, things like this is happening in our neighborhood. The septic tank stinks because it's overloading it and it hasn't been. So my opinion is, if you're doing what you're doing, which y'all sound like y'all are, this shouldn't hurt y'all. It's for people like me that are just gonna protect. You know,
Right,
that's
absolutely.
my opinion.
And I think that,
Except for me.
Just one more thing, and I'm done, I promise. You know, I'm not trying to be, I don't think Vicky is, I don't think anybody is trying to go be hard ass on the landlords, because I believe in capitalism and I like to, you know. But, and I'm like 4th of July, they're shooting water rockets over my house from the house across the street. I don't care, they're celebrating. I mean, it's, I like that, you know, let them bother me, I know it's gonna not be there the next day. But what I hear is on the weekends, when they rent just for the weekends, they come up from Atlanta and they're partying all night, and we gotta keep our TV on in the bedroom, 1:30, 2 o'clock, just to drown out the noise next door. That, I do care about that.
That's the one thing. I also, just so you know, I know the owners of my VRBO. Before I ever made a complaint to anybody here, I checked out the voter, texted her, called her. I mean, I did things and reply back was, well, they'll be gone soon.
so is there a noise ordinance in
Yeah,
place?
and I'll address that. We are in the process, there is a nuisance ordinance that covers quite a bit of this stuff. We have also, we're working on a disorderly house ordinance that goes.
We did pass that.
Yeah, we did pass and adopted that. And that basically gives the police the ability to actually tow vehicles that aren't where they're supposed to be from a parking standpoint. They didn't have that clear of an authorization before. And on the nuisance ordinance, it covers a whole bunch of these things, like the trash, et cetera. The other key part to this, where the real teeth are, before the police were just addressing the occupants. Okay, there's a penalty for the owner now, that if it doesn't get resolved, would cause them to have to appear in front of our judge. And there could be a penalty up to and including losing their license to rent. So there's some real teeth in this ordinance, and when you put the other two ordinances behind it.
Rick?
We're basically 381 West Sugar Ridge. So I think we're pretty much all in agreement here as far as the rentals go, for good owners, okay, but I want to go back to what you say, what the city already has an ordinance. We've got a neighbor that doesn't rent, but he owns a dog kennel. And you bring in Jacksonville, I think it's Jacksonville, he brings sometimes 15, 17 dogs all week, and they're there all weekend, they're yapping all weekend. We filed a complaint, chief came up. What did the chief say, Vicky?
I don't know.
Yeah, you do, you told me.
I do not.
Yeah. He said the guy said it wasn't his dogs, and he only had a couple, which it wasn't the case, okay? So he came back and with the response that, well, they said they didn't have the dogs there, they had just left. Well, they do have the dogs there. I mean, I don't think that we're putting any bite into the ordinances that are already there, is what I'm saying. So.
No pun intended.
He said that.
Yeah.
He
Ah, that
said
was
nobody
well.
around
Let me
here.
first,
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that nobody around me complained also, which is not true, because I complained and Vicky complained,
No,
and I
right
first
there.
complained, and I bet
I
that.
think he did.
let me first say that there's absolutely nothing we're gonna do with the short-term rental ordinance that's gonna change that situation. That has to happen at city council level.
Okay.
So, Gail.
Gail Greenfelder, 19 Erie Lane. It's shocking to me when somebody said that there a thing saying it sleeps 15. I mean, I guess there's big houses that sleep 15, but my neighbor has a place and it says sleeps 14. Now, is there going to be something that this internet company can do when you've got a 3-bedroom house and it sleeps 14 and they had 16 motorcycles, which, I mean, you could have 2 people on a motorcycle, 16 motorcycles for 4 days parked outside this house, and it says it sleeps 14. And so anyhow, I just wonder if that monitoring system could address something if you say it sleeps 14 and the address shows it's only.
That's one of the primary reasons we're going with those companies, for that exact reason.
Okay,
Because we will know, and they do some research on the actual, what the facility has been built and what is on record legally with them. And they will identify those things for us.
Let me go back. Go ahead.
And part of this thing, when you apply for a license, you have to certify that you meet the building codes,
okay, good.
right? Which are very specific of what qualifies as a bedroom and what the occupancy level is, et cetera.
It includes,
And
maximum occupancy.
right, and so when you start to put those things together, that then gives the city the right to go in and inspect. And if we find that they falsified the certification, they lose their license, or there could be other penalties there that the court would set. So there's some real teeth there.
Which is where I was going with this. The application process is very specific. You're gonna have to tell us how many legal bedrooms you've got. You're gonna tell us
Maximum.
how many legal parking spaces you've got on your property. Maximum occupancy of your property. And if these things on the application don't match up with county records, then we have the right, as Bill said, to go in and inspect, see what the true story is, and it can affect the ability to either receive that license in the first place, or you might lose the license after the fact. So,
Mr. Chairman, we have attendees on Zoom that have questions.
okay.
First question is will the monitoring company monitor short-term rental properties only, or all properties within the city? They would be monitoring short-term rentals only.
Short-term rentals only.
The other question is how will the internet company monitor the vacationers' dates? We use the home ourselves for us, friends and family, so it shows rented on Verbo website on those dates. The company that we're potentially looking at, Granicus, as well as the other companies, they basically crawl the internet or scrape the internet every day looking for these rentals. So,
They also keep a calendar of the occupancy so that we can correspond that with the hotel motel tax and so forth. So that's all cool, put together.
we have a Julio Torres that has his hand raised. Will you unmute him, Julia? if he wants to ask-
Yes.
ask his-
Good morning, Evelio Torres, and I'm at 230 Overlook Way. I have a couple of questions, and by the way, thank you for your work on the ordinance. I think it's not perfect, but it's a good start. One of my questions is this ordinance going to generate enough revenue for the city to cover the cost of enforcement, including when someone's license is revoked and they have to go through the due process, right? Everyone's going to have due process, and there's going to be attorneys fees and et cetera. Is that the ordinance going to generate enough revenue so that the costs don't get passed on to the homeowners through additional property taxes? That's one question.
It should, correct, yes. Based on what, again, Granicus, we have not selected to go with them yet, but as an example, they have shown through their scraping technology that there's about between 160, 170 homes right now being rented at $250 or whatever the final annual fee will be. You do the math, that we anticipate that should cover the cost of the monitoring company as well as other incidental fees.
And I suppose that includes the, of course, extra, the police department and other city services. So that was one question. Thank you for the answer. I mean, some additional analysis may be necessary in that area to make sure that the fees are high enough to cover the cost so that the rest of us who don't rent out our homes don't end up paying for the individuals who, of course, have the right to rent out their homes, but we want to make sure that they pay the full cost. Okay, the second question is, I didn't see it, and maybe I missed it on the ordinance. Is there a minimum number of days that someone can rent out their properties? Or can you rent out for like 2 days or 3 days or a weekend? Or is there like a 7-day minimum or anything like that in the ordinance?
No, there are no.
It's just a
minimums.
max, 30 days.
The weekends, what kills me, those weekend guys from the land.
So there are no minimum number of days in the ordinance?
Correct.
No minimum.
Each renter, it's 30 days or less is a short-term rental definition by the state.
Right, but for instance, I have a home in the city of Miami. We have a very strict short-term rental ordinance. And there are a certain number of minimum days. You can't rent for, a few days, and a number of other municipalities in South Florida have the same minimum number of nights requirement. So just wanted to find that out. So like I said, I think it's a good start, but I think we're going to have to go back to the drawing board once, the enforcement starts and all that to see if any.
Is he done? You kind of cut off there.
Video?
Think you got them.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, I was just ending by saying that I think it's a very good start, but I think maybe in 12 months or so, you may want to take another look at it and see if it's working the way it was intended and if it's covering the cost. But thank you once again for your work on this ordinance.
Thank you. Jim.
I was asking, I don't think I asked Betty a question, but Jim Byron, building inspector, but I'm also a resident here for 14 years. Previous short-term rental owner. As far as the minimum, most of the time, I've actually never seen anybody rent less than maybe 2, possibly 3 days, because it's just not worthwhile as an owner, if you've got a short-term rental, to rent it out for less than that because of the cleaning fees and just the city's fees. I was gonna ask him, what the minimum was down in Miami, but that's not really relevant to here. But I wanted to make that point. If you go on the VRBO or any of the other short-term rental sites, I've never seen one less than probably 3 days minimum, because it's just not cost effective.
Why did we get rid of the minimum that was originally, we talked about having a 7-day minimum? That would get rid of all my Atlanta riffraff.
We actually here never discussed it.
Well, I know it was the very first meeting I brought it up.
I don't recall.
On a Zoom meeting, was it, I think in February.
Was it a Zoom? It's, all right, we can start over here.
So my issue, I understand that you've got issues at your home, but when it comes back to the rental places here that are generating income for the area, as well as the owners that are renting the home, a 7-day minimum is absolutely ridiculous for us. There would be no way. Most people right now are traveling within 300 miles of their home to here. They're going into Franklin, back down towards Tallulah. And if you look at your algorithm numbers online, your rental companies, most people are renting for 3 days. Now, I don't see where it would be, mandatory to put a restriction on how many days we can rent the home. That's not that's really.
I'm not sure Georgia law would allow us to do
just
that.
gonna say
Right, that's what
that.
I was
I don't know
wondering,
that
because you're
it's
taking
even
away
legal.
rights from the.
Even 3-day minimum would be them coming up Friday and Saturday.
We would really have to look into whether the Georgia law would even allow that.
Is this gonna really toughen up on the ones that aren't doing what they're supposed to? Because I think at the end of the day too, you know, like with her, if we're doing what we're supposed to do, I mean, if I have to come out here 3 or 4 times in a day for whatever reason, I'm willing to do that. But the ones that are not fulfilling it are gonna end up causing problems for those of us that do. So how strong is this gonna be and how?
This gives me a chance though, before I couldn't report anything.
Right.
So before I couldn't
And I don't
do
blame
anything.
you.
Yeah,
I don't
before,
blame you.
but I can't do anything until this ordinance is passed.
Right.
So this is why it's not for the ones that are doing it.
Right.
I couldn't do anything before this.
Well, I mean, it angers me for the ones that aren't also, because
Well, of
it's a
course,
bad
you know,
name on
It's like
everybody.
everything else in life. A few people are gonna spoil it for the
Right,
rest.
right.
I think
The combination of this ordinance and
Disorderly
the
house.
disorderly house ordinance, the
And the-
nuisance ordinance, and enforcement thereof, the combination is gonna help greatly, I'm sure.
And the fact you could lose the license.
That's the aspect of this ordinance. It's so good. Gail, I think you had a question.
Yeah, that my neighbor is, Emilio. I was going to ask the question, and he brought this up because in law, married to a lawyer for all these years, I know that sometimes you can charge the losing party all the attorney's fees. They were wondering whether, so is this going to be perhaps in our ordinance that you could, and the word could, be responsible for all attorney's fees and court costs if in fact you are found to be in violation?
Probably would be up to the judge.
That would be up to the judge. The judge awards those fees.
We have
Somebody
another
on the line?
question. We have Gary, Mr. Chairman, if you want. Gary, you have the floor?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I just had a few comments and questions. Actually, I think the ordinance, your time and effort in it, and it really did, it's more reasonable right now. So I had a couple questions. Does this apply to the time sharings? Because are they not short-term rentals as well?
This does not apply to the timeshares. That's a whole issue, different animal over there. Can we first off get your name and?
Yes, Gary Martoccio, Martoccio, 628 Rebel Circle.
Thank you. The timeshares this is applying to the R1 residential zoning, and the timeshares are a whole different animal.
But aren't they on Sky Valley property?
They are, but they're a different zoning designation, multifamily zoning designation.
Okay, but all right. I guess that's a different discussion, but anyway, they are short-term in my mind. Anyway, so I had a couple questions. The monitoring, and I know someone asked the question and you did answer it, but we, for instance, we do rent it out, but we use it often ourselves. And we do block it off that it looks like it, obviously not rented on Vrbo and Airbnb. So that internet monitoring, you were talking about taxes and that, but that would be after the fact. So would we be monitored as if we're there a month as owners? Because it would show that someone's in there, but I mean, unless you identify that we're there XYZ amount of time, would that internet monitor, and I don't have a problem with it because we comply 120%.
We'll let our code enforcement answer that.
Okay.
The monitoring that this company is going to do, it only shows the active rentals. So if you have, again, speaking as a previous renter, owner, if you show it blocked out, it's not shown as rented, it's blocked out for, personal reasons. It's not showing income, coming in, so no, that won't be included in that.
Okay, thank you. And a couple of more questions. I know this license now, where do we receive it? Do we need to come in person? Will it be online? When will this all go in effect and what is the cost?
The logistics of that are still being worked out.
At this point, this is a public hearing and a recommendation to the city council that will go before first reading in August, introduction, second reading and adoption in September. And in that process, and during that time, once this is adopted, and if the city does decide to partner with a company, the application, all of those things will be presented and made available. So
At City Hall.
at City Hall.
So will we be able to apply online or will we have to come in person to get that license?
The plan is to do this, to be able to do this online, or at least be able to retrieve the forms. And then if you need to send them in, et cetera, but the plan is to make this as
Painless.
painless as possible. Yes, Mayor.
So when do you think the earliest that this would go in effect? January?
As the ordinance is written, it would go into effect at the adoption second reading in September, which would be the third Tuesday in September. I think that's the 19th maybe. So yeah, this is, again, today is just for the P and Z board to provide a recommendation of public hearing.
But you will give us time to apply for this license, correct?
There'll be plenty of notifications. There'll be another public hearing on the 15th of August, which will be the first reading. There'll be a public hearing at 9 a.m. And then there will be a first reading introduction at 10 a.m. on the 15th of August. And then it will carry over until September for the second reading and adoption.
I think his question is, will be a grace period once this goes into effect to get.
That's correct.
Yes. Obviously, it will take time to, particularly if we partner with a company, people will obviously have time to make the process to apply. That may be something that the council may want to set 30 days, 60 days.
We'll work out.
Yeah, that'd be work for.
Do you know the cost of the license?
City council will set that.
Council, and that will be duly advertised as we move forward as well, so you'll have plenty of opportunity to know what that is before it's approved.
All righty. That's it. I thank you and I hope that we could work together because I know 90% of the short-term rentals are in compliance already. And it is always those couple that, like you said, is why you're here today. So we are in compliance and we hope to work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think you were first, then Gail, and then over here. Shirley.
Shirley,
Yeah.
if the ordinance goes into effect this fall sometime, will the fee that's paid then be prorated? Or will it work for the whole, will you receive an entire year of licensing?
Yes.
The license will be good for 1 year from the date that you apply.
Thank you.
Okay,
Just a suggestion on Anna Marie Island, when you apply for this license, you then receive in the mail a sticker that has to be displayed on somewhere where everybody knows. And
signifying a
that you,
licensed property.
that signifies that you, and then it's got the year, that you have been certified by the city to be short-term rental.
Good
And that
point,
has
good
to be
point. I'm
displayed.
sure Jason is making a note of that.
Yeah.
Well, that should be part of the original plan, that whoever it'll be that informational sheet.
Mhm.
This is your address, this is the number to the nearest hospital. That way, if something happens, whoever's renting that property, they know that, okay, I'm at 1313 Mockingbird Lane, that they're in compliance, that'll be part of that. So,
Well,
yes.
but just,
Yeah.
because it
But
should be
it's something that
displayed somewhere
identifies
where
to the
if
public.
I'm driving by her house and there's 15 cars and they're all over the street. She's not having a bar mitzvah for somebody, she's got a rental because it says STL on the sticker. So it's just a way that could inform everybody.
It's a point taken.
Good point, yeah, good point.
It's a good suggestion. having spent 35 years in the hospitality industry, identifying something that to just general public is a security issue. So you wouldn't want to do that. That's why, if you remember back in the day, you would check into a hotel and you would be able to flip the thing, maid requested or occupied. They removed that because that told the bad guys whether it was occupied or not. And so I would have a concern about doing that, that would be visible from the street. We will have it on this internet service that we're going to have. All the stuff they scrape from the internet, they will have it identified on there for us, whether there's a license, valid license in place. So we'd be able to identify ones that weren't. Different issue. I understand what you're saying.
I guess the police don't understand in Anna Maria then, because it's been there for a long time. Anyway, you can't engineer the risk out of everything. It just would be helpful for people, I would think.
That is, there's been a lot of lawsuits related to something.
What about, well, if you would report it to the non-emergency 911, because I had a problem with that, we got that, and the mailbox was full of it. So, I mean, police department can't have the mailbox full, you know?
Well, this is why the internet company would be so advantageous to us, Vicki, because they have someone on
They would have some.
24/7.
They have an entire call center.
They have the staff that the city hasn't got.
I got you.
Well, that's the whole purpose of that.
I got you.
Question over here.
Yeah, so I had a few questions. When you said earlier that you would be able to differentiate online, whether it was an owner or a renter, I'm confused on that, because if the days are blocked out, they're simply blocked out. So if you go in and look at it, you can't see Tim staying Monday through Friday. You can't see all this background information. So are you also asking the owners to give up more rights to privacy for this company to be able to see the backside? Then how do they see it?
They only see when it's, they can identify that it's been rented.
That it's occupied.
That it's occupied.
Just occupied.
Not rented, yeah, they can't.
Right, yeah.
So that's why I'm asking, how are you gonna, like, knowing what the rental amount is and knowing how many people are there, that's like a
They have
huge
it all the way
privacy
into the
invasion.
future.
So the Airbnb or Airbnb will tell you,
Right.
if you request the information, that this is the owner occupied or a rental.
No,
It doesn't show that.
it doesn't
doesn't
say
show that
owner, it'll
online.
just, it'll show a calendar and it's got
Right,
X's
right.
on the day that it's being rented.
So
That's-
So how are you gonna
will-
differentiate whether it's an owner or a rental?
You can't. Not from looking
Same
at.
way we do now. You know, and to a certain extent, there's gonna have to be faith involved.
I mean, if the
You know,
calendar has an X, and that means it's being rented. It's being rented.
It's not if it
But
doesn't have.
what they're saying is that X doesn't necessarily mean it's being rented, just that it's being occupied, and it could be the owner.
The owner could be
Does
saying.
this have anything to do with the ordinance, or is this just?
It absolutely does.
This is more the logistics of monitoring it after the fact.
So that will there be more in-depth explanation on this monitoring company and like what they're actually allowed to see inside of the owner's accounts? Because
They're not going in.
They're not going into the owner's
They're
account.
scraping the internet and getting information that's available to all the public.
Just like AirDNA does. Okay, AirDNA is a service you can subscribe to find out what's going on with short-term rentals in any zip code. They scrape the internet and they sell the data to anyone who will pay for it.
yeah.
Did that answer your question?
No, because I'm still, and maybe I'm missing something. So what I'm understanding is there will be taxes and stuff like this. So is this monitoring system being set up to also monitor the amount of income that the rental is generating? Because then we get back into the other aspect again of you can't tell if it's a renter or the owner or an owner's friend, or they blocked it out to have work done on it. So are they gonna
Let
be
me ask you
charged per
this.
day?
If we did not have this monitoring service and the city was doing it, how would that change?
That's why I'm asking. I don't
You know,
really know.
Right now, we have to rely on the fact that you're sending taxes in per law,
Uh-huh.
and that you're doing it legally and truthfully. This is going to give the city an opportunity to catch some of those people who are renting their properties who maybe aren't licensed,
That aren't doing it.
aren't sending taxes in and so forth, and give the opportunity for the city to follow up further.
Okay, so it will be based on a daily occupancy rate? I'm just trying to figure out where those taxes are gonna come into play.
The taxes come into play because you know, if you're using Airbnb, Airbnb sends the taxes.
Right,
Okay.
To you.
yeah,
To
yeah,
the city.
yes.
If there is a rental there that's showing dates that are blocked out and taxes aren't coming in, then the city has the right to go and question that.
So if the owner comes for 2 months of the year, then what?
Then the owner says, I'm here for 2 months of the year, and enough is said.
Okay,
Like when you go on VRBO and you look at a specific house, it asks you when you want to rent. It pops up a calendar and it's designated on the calendar when it's already being rented.
correct.
That's all we're doing.
That's all they're looking
Okay.
at.
That's all we're looking at. Does
I just
that
didn't
answer
know,
your question?
yes,
Okay.
because I was, that's what I was misunderstanding. I
Okay.
wanted to make sure I understood. Thank you so much.
Okay, anybody else? Yes, sir.
Doug Parks, West Sugar Bush, and, you know, I know there's good ones, but for our neighborhood problem, I do ask that y'all pass this ordinance. And give us a, an out, like Vicky says, that we can monitor, or at least have some teeth.
Sure.
You know, we got an example at our house, or the house near us on Thanksgiving night. They had brought the fire pit onto the wooden deck and had an 8-foot flames. All back there. I had no recourse what to do.
You will
Call
have.
anybody.
See that gentleman in the back corner?
Makes me nervous because my house.
But
burned all the way
we
down.
had inflatable toys in the driveway all weekend and all the cars. And must have been a family reunion. There were 20 kids playing in the inflatables all weekend in the whole driveway. So,
But you can't have 16 people in there.
but yeah, there's
16 kids.
been 9 or 10 pickup trucks a week. I guess it could be one each. but
We hope this will solve your problems.
So thank y'all, and I do request y'all pass.
You should have paid for rain, therefore the fire would have been out.
It was very dangerous, but I had no number to call.
Oh, I'm sure.
Now you will.
Well, now you will, because that's another aspect of this monitoring company. There will be a number to call, they will log that complaint, and you know that's gonna get back to the owner, and you know, if I was that owner, I'd be certainly concerned about an occupant that I put in there potentially burning my house down.
I don't think there's any monitoring that goes in that house.
Back here first, then Ruby.
Do it. 911, my neighbor's deck's on fire.
So with the occupancy rate, you know, so like one of my houses back in Franklin will actually sleep 14 people. But is there, I don't know what, I'm still learning the Georgia law side. So is there a limit? So if it's 16 people max, but then you can't tell them that their mom and dad can't come by, or their sisters can't stop by. So is there gonna be something that maybe could be added into the ordinance on a house like that, you know, could keep the number of people down, like large gathering amounts?
This house started out as a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And they put some bunk beds in, and they put some bunk beds in the basement.
Yeah.
But now it's a 5-4.
But the ordinance would take care of that.
Yes.
So it will go by the septic.
The ordinance takes care of it in that they've got to comply with the International Residential Code.
Right.
So, you know, those, so if somebody's got bunk beds in the basement and those aren't legal bedrooms, then there's an issue.
We have,
Wait a minute, Rudy in the back.
I just, want to go back to originally, there was a, discussion on the owner had to have somebody on property, if they couldn't be themselves within an hour, if there was a concern. Is the company we're partnering with gonna be the ones to notify the owner to tell them that?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's gonna stay in place.
Yes.
Super, thank you.
Yeah,
All right, I think
we get to.
you have somebody online?
we have a comment, and we have a question, well, actually, Angela Morris, if the honesty system has been working, is it really necessary to have a monitoring company? I'm not sure how they will be able to tell the difference on the VRBO site. I think the intent of this monitoring company is not to so much to track the taxes. That is up to VRBO and those folks to send that in. The intent is to find folks who are in fact renting their house as a short-term rental, and to be that contact point at 2 o'clock in the morning. If you have an issue when City Hall is closed, you call them, they call the owner and say, fix it. That is, the intent is not to differentiate. They're not tracking the taxes. Those taxes are paid directly, excise taxes are paid directly through the internet sites, Verbo, Airbnb, to the city.
To the city.
Now, it will be a measuring stick, as the chairman said, that if they're saying it looks like the house has been rented for 20 days this month, and it's showing X amount of money per night, we should be able to take that night by those days and calculate 8% to say, okay, well, then we have something to go back to Verbo Airbnb, or are they paying their full amount? But again, I don't think the intent is to try to differentiate what nights. The intent of this is to track folks who are in fact renting their house as a short-term rental, and to provide those services to try to fix these issues as they arise more effectively.
Very good. Debbie?
Debbie McAfee, Pine Drive. This is a comment to the owner renters. Something that you should all think about very seriously. Many insurance companies, they'll sell you a property policy, a fire policy. But the moment that you set out to rent that property, that coverage could be denied, as you were saying, the insurance company may deny coverage if that house burned down, because they were accepting money. So you need to confirm with your insurance agent that you can rent this house.
Excellent. Yeah, I've said
They
it
charge you
before
more
about
money
insurance.
That will be one of the affirmations.
And that's what should happen.
Well
Like
said,
you are-
Once it's rented as a
Excellent.
business, you
Increase
lose
the money.
your home.
Excellent.
That should be one of the affirmations that the owner, when they sign for this license, they affirm they meet all the requirements. So that'll be one of the things that they have all of their appropriate insurance in place. So so that way, if something happens, it's on there.
Good job.
We have a question also, Mr. Chairman, from Mr. Torres. Can the city please start keeping track of the cost of enforcement to make sure the STR fees and taxes cover the cost of enforcement and additional burden on city services? That will be something, obviously, that we will be tracking. The monitoring service should be able to help us track those costs, those fees.
Plus we'll have.
And this is really a work in progress. We feel like, based on what we're gonna receive and what this monitoring company is gonna cost, it should cover those costs. However, as we get into this and the time goes by, we determine that it's costing more, then we'll have to adjust accordingly.
And that's why I brought that up, about having it in there and asking the city attorney to write it in there that you could, if you're in violation, you could be subject to paying all the court costs and so on in relation to that. It should be in there in writing.
Okay, we'll talk to him about it.
Talk to the attorney.
All right. Anybody else?
I just think it's time to vote. We've been talking about this a year and a half. It is time to
Yeah.
put it to a vote, right or wrong, put it to a vote.
Amen.
Second that.
We know, Vicky, bureaucracy moves rapidly.
All right, right over here.
I apologize, I'm Fred Buchanan at 300 West Sugar Bush. And I was under the understanding that we were coming here to a zoning board meeting to discuss this ordinance.
That's what this
That's
is.
exactly what we've been doing.
Oh, this is the zoning board?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Oh, I thought y'all were city council.
Nope.
Oh.
This is the
Oh, I heard some of it.
Sorry, but
There's some overlap.
Well, I would like to address the ordinance if it's the appropriate time.
That's what we've been doing.
Well, I apologize, I thought it was at 11 o'clock.
no, that's the vote.
That's when the vote takes place. This is-
You got 6 minutes.
I apologize, I'm a little bit nervous, because when I saw this, I'll explain to you a little bit later, but hey, first of all, I live at 300 West Sugar Bush. My wife and I have been up here for the last 3 or 4 years. We first came up here because friends of ours from Chipley, Florida, that's where I reside. They had a timeshare up here, and they eventually got found a small house that they could buy. So they bought a house up here. Later on, they invited us up to visit, and we came up a couple of times. And the house, after we fell in love with Sky Valley, and we wound up in the house next to them became available. Then we bought that house, and that's where we planned on spending our winters up here. My condition, and excuse me, I say winter, you did. We had planned on, like a lot of other people, spending our summers up here and the winters in Chipley. We still have a lot of ties there. I have rental property there, so.
I'm sorry, that wasn't for you, Mr. Buchanan. Go ahead.
I have rental property there, so I can speak a little bit about when you're talking about rentals. Also worked for the city of Chipley for 20 years. I was first their public works director. I was in charge of the water, gas, the sewer, sewage treatment plant, the garbage, cemetery, industrial park, all the infrastructure. So I know what it is to have to enforce regulations. Also, and then I became city clerk. So then I know what it's about to try to keep up with the finances. Because no matter what it is with the city, almost everything is an expense. So you're always looking for a way of generating money. Well, that's by tax money, or property taxes, or fees for whatever happens to be. One thing about taxes is the commercial people pay most of the taxes. The residents don't pay much taxes. In Florida, you have a homestead exemption. So if you live in your own house, you get a huge tax break. So you got to make up that revenue somehow. So you wind up charging the commercial people more because the residents are the ones that do the voting, and they keep the city council. So it's kind of like we see in Congress. It's not a good idea. It's easy to pass an ordinance if you don't have to enforce it yourself. There's always somebody. So you wind up hiring somebody to enforce an ordinance. Then when you do that, that's another expense. And when you're dealing with personnel, then that kind of escalates. Regulation just promotes more regulation. Thomas Sowell, who's one of the smartest people I ever known in the world, he said there's no such thing as a solution. There's only trade-off. There's trade-offs. Everything you pass results in trading off something else. And so, when you, I don't know what the city's problem is that warranted this type of regulation. It's so encompassing with everything. And I noticed also that when the city buys into health and safety regulations, that's saying we're responsible. It doesn't matter if it's in the state of Georgia or the state of Florida or the city or the county especially. We're gonna do it because some other city does it. It might work there and it might not work there because you don't live in it. But I know when you buy into a regulation, then you become liable for it. Not only the city becomes liable for it, the city council becomes liable for it. And regardless of whether you got your insurance policy that the city has paid for, you're still going to be sued. So I just want you, but my experience with this 20 years of dealing with this stuff, be very cautious whenever you start blanket regulations. And I addressed the lady about the insurance while ago. I've got rental property. I've got you know, insurance is insurance. They don't, insures your house for whatever they want to insure, whatever you ask them to insure it for. You can't get homeowners policy if you rent it. That's a rental problem. They don't let you do both. Homeowners policy a lot cheaper. And there are probably people that doesn't tell, you know, if you're trying to find the people that are not telling you that they're renting, that ought to be addressed, but not everything. I know how hard it is. And so, you know, I pay rental insurance, but it's not my permanent resident. You can only have one resident, I think. In the state of Florida, that's the way it is. You can't have two residents.
That's true. Dale?
Dale Fenwick, 36 Big Bear Trail. I'm gonna have to leave here in a couple of minutes for another appointment, but I want to respond to your comments. First of all, if you had attended any of the Planning and Zoning Commission meetings over the last year plus, you would know that why this is needed. Okay. Because there have been numerous discussions about problem short-term rentals. So that's why it's needed. Number two, there are at least 50 municipalities in the state of Georgia that have short-term rental regulations, including Reagan County, including the city of Clayton, and others. Okay, so this is nothing new. In fact, to a certain extent, we could say that the city of Sky Valley is maybe a little behind her, or maybe we say just has been more diligent than the others.
We'll go with that.
But this ordinance frankly is, I think, desperately needed, and as Vicky has said, we think it's time to vote.
Okay. That being said, I think we will adjourn the hearing and call the next Planning and Zoning Council meeting to order. First order of business. Oh, do we need a motion to it? Okay, so moved. Second, all in favor? All right, thank you.
Yeah, it's close.
Now,